The only team UConn should be worried about, they may not even play. You're Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. UConn is playing Alabama on Saturday, whose fans are pretty fun, as I've seen a little bit today on X. But nobody at UConn is worried about them, and they shouldn't be. If I'm being honest, the team I'm worried about is a team we may never even play, and it's NC State. Joining us today is Kenton Gibbs of Locked On Wolfpack. Kenton, if UConn and NC State both win, do you share my sentiment that this would feel really scary for the Huskies or really anybody in the Wolfpack's path?
Oh, absolutely. It should be absolutely terrifying. And you know, a lot of people don't understand exactly how many similarities there are and between the run that NC State is currently having and the 1983 season where the Wolfpack claimed their second ever national championship in basketball under Coach Jimmy V, the surviving advanced team. You know, I had on Thurl Bailey, who was a member of that team, who made the pass before the shot, which Derek Wittenberg calls a pass, that Lorenzo Charles ended up dunking home for NC State to beat Phi Slama Jama. And it's been 41 years since that happened. Do you know what Thurl Bailey's number is?
What's his number?
41. 41. There's a lot of weird coincidences like that I'm like, I don't think people understand. You know, I can't remember what show it was, but Benedict Cumberbatch was the actor, and he said, "What do we say of coincidences?" And his assistant said, "The universe is rarely so lazy." I think that there are just too many moments to look at during this run where you're like, there's something at play here that's larger than the numbers. It's larger than the nerds. Yes, sure, Derek Wittenberg ain't walking through that door to suit up for NC State. You know, God rest his soul. Lorenzo Charles isn't either. Coach V is no longer with us either. But there's a lot of things, you know. For example, when's the last time a player won? Zach Edey is going to be the back-to-back National Player of the Year, right?
Yep.
When's the last time we saw a player win back-to-back National Player of the Year?
You tell me.
82, 83, Ralph Sampson, who NC State had to beat to get into the tournament. NC State having to beat Virginia to get into the tournament. Didn't they have to do that this year too? So it's not just the 7'4" Goliath that's a freak of nature that nobody can get around having to beat that guy, but it's also that back-to-back Player of the Year thing. And even beyond that, here's one of the funniest things about this whole deal. There was also their coaches had never won a NCAA tournament game at State, despite being there multiple years. It was year 3 for Jimmy V, year 7 for Coach Keats. Neither coach had won a single NCAA tournament game up until Jimmy V won a national championship and until this year for Keats.
Listen, you're preaching to the choir right now, and nobody, and I really do feel like most of my audience is diehard UConn fans. We're going to get to why I see parallels to this team and Kemba Walker's 2011 team for obvious reasons. 5 games in 5 nights in the Big East tournament and 5 games in the ACC. But it's too scary for me to even talk about, because I even have friends who a really good friend of mine, you probably know this name, Cy Alexander. Him and I were talking just the other day. He was an NC State A&T coach, South Carolina State. He's really good friends with Ray Martin, who was an assistant on that Jimmy V team. And he said, almost everything you're saying, it's making him relive all of these moments all over again. And what's interesting is his comment to me, you know, privately was, if they are to beat Purdue, the Ralph Sampson stuff is a great parallel, but then they're playing the tried and true best team in the country, likely UConn, right? And that's what NC State had to do as well, is they get to that final. They had to beat Houston, who had all these great players, Hakeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler. It would just be, you know, sometimes the universe is just weird. Like you made a parallel. Like I just would have a hard time going into that game comfortable as I am playing Alabama. I'd be the opposite against State.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, the reality is again, the nerds keep saying there was the chances of NC State to get here were less than 100th of a percent. Well,
Yep.
less than 100th of a percent, and yet here we are. You know, what was the chance that any of us were the cell that got to the egg and won? And yet, here you and I are, Mark, having this conversation. So odds may be one thing, but reality often remembers it another way. And I'll give you another fun fact because UConn is a school that's used to seeing success in both men and women's basketball.
Yep.
This is the 14th time in NCAA history since they've been keeping track of this type of stuff that a singular school sent one men's and women's team to the Final Four. Did you know that this is the first time in history both teams were 9 or more point underdogs?
Really?
The men's team is a 9.5 point underdog to Purdue. The women's team is a 12.5 or 11.5 point underdog to South Carolina. I am trying to tell you, the universe is telling you things that don't even make sense because NC State, in terms of the women's team, they have played each of the 3 other teams that are still in the tournament right now for the women. They played all of them in the last 3 years, and they've beaten all of them, including UConn in UConn.
Yep.
Like, what?
That's wild.
What are we doing here? So it's one of those moments where, you know, I'm just telling you, this is it's a moment that, you know, I don't want to say that UConn is Phi Slamma Jamma reincarnated because it's not. You know what I mean? Like UConn, you know, Hurley is doing a phenomenal job with you all. You all are deep. You all have multiple different players that can get it done in multiple different ways. So it isn't quite the same as the Hakeem Olajuwon and Drexler situation or Benny Anders or however you would look at that situation. A little different. But this is a moment where you kind of look up there and you say there's an undefeatable buzzsaw on the line for both teams here. Neither team is getting any respect, as NC State didn't, because their entire run in '83 was a fluke, and it was only because John Wooden had retired a year or two earlier, and Farmer, who was the new coach of UCLA, they got put out by Utah, and if that doesn't happen, then NC State doesn't end up in that position, but they did. And this year it's, well, if McNeely hits the free throw and if O'Connell doesn't hit that super lucky 3, they'll end up in this position. Well, they did. Those things did happen. And so now we're looking at a moment where, again, this is unlike anything that we've ever seen because, you know, this is 5 games in 5 days. That was a first ever in conference history. And then you move beyond that to see 4 games won. And in those 4 games, you only spent a total of like 3 minutes trailing in the first 4 combined or in the first 3 combined. The only one that you spent a decent chunk of trailing was against Duke.
Yep.
And you came back and put the beats on them. I agree. If I was Hurley and company and I saw NC State on the other side, fellas, we're the better team. But so has everybody been, apparently. And being the better team has not meant much.
I actually can see Hurley talking to this team about, you know, because they're very siloed in like next game and all that stuff. So if it is State and it isn't Purdue, I could see him making something up to make UConn the underdog. It's just it's just in his DNA. It's just what he does. But we're gonna talk about the parallels between the 2011 Kemba Walker-led UConn squad that won 5 games in 5 nights in the Big East tournament, and then parlayed that into a championship, and see if we can kind of create some parallels with this NC State team. We'll do that after this. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boasting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA and 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some real legal info, claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. All right, Kenton. The 2011 UConn team, one of my favorites of all time. Kemba Walker, one of my favorite players of all time. He's had dogs named after him. I'm sure he's had children named after him. You guys have quite a bit of a big star, and I don't mean that in a punny way, with DJ Burns being a big guy. He is the biggest star on the biggest stage right now. He's got Nikola Jokic calling him out in the NBA. What can you make some comparisons? I know DJ's different than Kemba. Kemba was a point guard, obviously played for the Hornets locally. What are some parallels with this NC State team to UConn in respect of the star power?
Well, in respect to the star power, I actually think that there are less parallels than we think, but I will say this. Kemba Walker was Mr. Everything for that team, and DJ Burns, for large parts of the regular season, was going through different things in terms of illnesses and trying to play his way back into shape from those things. And so our leading scorer is, in fact, guard DJ Horne, despite the fact that Mo Diarra has just been, it may be Ramadan and he may not be able to eat until the sun's down, but he's eating the glass so efficiently and so tough. He's going to fill up on boards alone. And DJ Burns has come on to win Most Outstanding Player of both the ACC tournament, and if NC State wins it, obviously he'll win the Most Outstanding Player of the NCAA tournament as well. But DJ Horne, who is our point guard, was our Mr. Everything for large stretches of the season as well. So I will say that there is a definite similarity in that. The other similarity I would say in terms of the Kemba Walker UConn team and this team is that UConn team was better than this NC State team, and they weren't exactly like in a situation where it was like, hey, if y'all don't win the tournament, y'all aren't going to get in. Like they weren't in that situation, but they were a team that they kept it exciting. They kept it very exciting. I remember that crossover step back on McGee like it was yesterday. I'm sure brother still having nightmares about it. McGee from Pitt. I'm sorry. I know the Pitt fans don't want to revel in that, and I'm sure not many Pitt fans are watching, but don't send this to him if you know the young man. But that was quite a moment right there. And you have seen so many signature moments like that be created along this run. We just talked about McNeely's missed free throw, but also the game tying shot that went into overtime by Michael O'Connell. That is forever going to be an iconic image with their hands touching like it was that I can't remember what the name of the picture is, but it's like two folks reaching out to each other and they're both like touching this light and all that. It looked a lot like that. Or you've got just DJ Burns completely demoralizing Kyle Filipowski and hitting him with the twinkle toes, which is another one where people are like, oh, like this is some moment here. There's a lot to be said in terms of signature moments that come out of runs like this. And so I'd probably say that between those two teams, that may be where the similarities in, because again, both teams do keep it exciting, but exciting in different ways, because that cardiac Kemba run, it was more like they kind of took it easy and then woke up at the end and were like, oh, we need to show up. Where's a basketball game to play? We just forgot in the first half. This NC State team has trailed at half twice during this entire run, I want to say, to Louisville of all teams,
right?
And Duke in the Elite Eight.
Yeah, no, I agree there. I think what the interesting part for me is this NC State run is more impressive. Even as a UConn fan, I give that up because NC State was 10th in the ACC this year, correct?
Yeah,
and
10th in the ACC.
UConn was 9th in that Big East, but they were also ranked right before the Big East tournament. So that Big East was a monster, and beating that Pittsburgh team, I think they were a top 5 team. Then they had to play a Louisville team that was a national title contender in the finals. So the run itself, the teams that they played were equally as impressive. But the fact that NC State was literally quite literally fighting for their lives to stay relevant in the NCAA tournament picture versus going to maybe the NIT or not playing postseason basketball altogether, I have to give it up to NC State. I heard a rumor, and I don't know if you can substantiate this, from NC State that they literally had a candidate already picked out, and that he might have actually been in the building with their AD for the ACC tournament to kind of check some things out. Kevin Keatts they were drawing up those papers. Can you shed some light on any of that?
I will not confirm or deny any reports along those lines until this is all decided out and we see what happens in terms of the NCAA tournament. What I will say is this. Grayson Boone and I had a saying for Coach Keatts all year that many people did not agree with us on originally, but they started to come around as the season came to a close and we went 2-7 in the last 9 games. No dance, no chance. That meant if NC State was not going dancing, Coach Kevin Keatts did not have a snowball's chance in hell at being retained as the head coach. Now, as the season went on, I will in fact confirm that the sentiment amongst many in the fan base had switched. And he was very close to losing the boosters as well. And that is what I will confirm. And anything beyond that, it's speculation, Your Honor. Speculation.
Yeah, no, I hear you. My only other question about these parallels really is I see a few different things. I love, because I feel like DJ Horn, he doesn't remind me of Kemba. I don't Kemba was dynamic, he was twitchy, he was shorter. But DJ Horn is a special athlete. He's playing for his hometown. Mm-hmm. There's just something about kind of the way he's been playing. Like, he even started off slow against Duke, and then it's like it's almost like he I hate to say flipped a switch because it's cliche, but that's what it looked like. He was just like, all right, I'm not going home. I'm not going home today. What can they do? Because this is a different animal. We talked about this, Zach Edey. What can they do? Because this will lead into the next segment. What can they do to spell DJ Burns guarding him? Because that's going to be a tough matchup. What do you think?
The question when you're looking at a Zach Edey is always the same question. What does an intimidator do when he cannot intimidate? You need to bully and intimidate Zach. I'm going to tell you right now, a young man who, in a moment where you can celebrate your team, talk about how special what you and your guys are doing are, and instead you go the route of, I've been overlooked my whole life while playing at IMG and being 7 feet tall in high school. That is a deeply insecure and mentally not, let me not say mentally weak, but somebody who may not have the mental makeup or construction to deal with folks who are going to be there and say, hey, anybody but you, Zach. We're going to build a wall at the rim. And I know, they're the number 2 3-point shooting team in the nation. You know what they did last game when they got tight? 3 of 15. Mm-hmm. You know what they did last? Oh, we've got and Braden Smith, we've got an all-conference guy. How did that work out when the lights got really bright? Because nobody cares about a Tuesday game against Wisconsin. Let's just be honest. Shout out to the Badgers. I think they are a wonderful program. Nobody cares. But in the Final Four, now people care. Elite Eight, people care. And what did they do? The lights got mighty bright. They start gripping the ball a little tighter. They start aiming it a little bit tougher on those jump shots. And all of a sudden, that team that we saw, they just couldn't be stopped from deep. And they, in the words of Glorilla, NC State got 99 problems, and the biggest one is Edey. If you can stop him, if you can say anybody but Zach Edey, go ahead and beat us, I think NC State does fine there. Especially if Purdue misses a couple of those early shots. Oh, then they start to feel it. See, it is what Vegas never accounts for. It's what the nerds don't account for. It's why the Oakland A's don't have a ring, despite the fact that they play the toughest money ball. And, hey, he gets on base. He gets people out. Guess what? There's a reason that may help you. The nerds have a place in sports, but they don't have that big of a place in sports because they can't quantify that. Who's going to crack under pressure? Who's going to be the one that when they feel it start getting a little tight, they can say, I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to dig down and find something versus the guy who says, oh, it's a little tight. I'm going to check out. I'm going to go ahead and check out. I want NC State to make them prove that they can win it tight. Hey, well, if Braden Smith can go off for 40, more power to him. But I just saw Zach go for 40. And I'm going to ask you this question, Mark.
Sure.
Which shot would you rather have a team shoot? 7'4", two-time player of the year, within 8 feet of the basket, or at best an all-conference guy from 25 to 30 feet away from the basket?
No, I mean, listen, I think you'd rather have them shooting contested threes versus contested jump hooks.
So I know that Purdue fans, much like Bama fans, like to get in a tizzy when you say that their team, who's lost 4 games this season, isn't perfect. And in those games, you know the really funny part about it? When I said, oh, well, if you make anybody but Edey beat you, you've got a shot. In the 4 games that Purdue has lost this year, their three-point shooting, although they were one of the best in the country,
sure,
they keep telling me we were one of the best in the country, 26 or 77 from deep in their 4 losses. Things that make you go, you know, there may be something to that. There may be something to saying if they're not having a great shooting night, you've got a shot. But if you let Edey cook, you know, congratulations. That's Katie Dids at the doorstep. If you let him go off at 30 plus, good night down the road for a long flight, friend. It's been a wonderful season.
I don't disagree. Well, I have to ask you a question. Not you specifically, Kenton, but are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, we're going to dive further into our predictions and what to look for in this star-studded men's Final Four after this. Don't strike out on opening day. Get MLB tickets fast and easy with Game Time, now an authorized MLB ticket marketplace. Prices drop as Game Time approaches. Discover killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and panoramic seat views with features like flash deals and zone deals. You can save big while enjoying the game hassle-free. Plus, enjoy Game Time ticket coverage for peace of mind. Experience the excitement of live baseball. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code, spell out Locked On College for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Kenton, listen, you've given us some really great stuff on NC State and what to look for in this potentially hypothetical matchup with UConn. But and also talked about Purdue. Let's dive more into Purdue, but I'm also going to ask you to put on your analyst hat for UConn, Alabama. I have been, as you can say, under siege would be the wrong term. I've had some interesting conversations with Alabama fans on my social media account because I referred to Mark Sears as a munchkin in the last game going against Stephon Castle. Shorter guards, dynamic offense, not something that UConn hasn't seen before. Curious what your thoughts are from an objective perspective on Alabama UConn.
Alabama UConn is so interesting to me because, nobody's giving Alabama a shot. And I get why, because this UConn team has proven that they can win in so many different ways. And they've proven that they can win in more ways than Alabama has from the standpoint of they're a consistent winner and a champion. They've already shown that they can do it when the lights get the brightest. And that, like I said, when that it kicks on, you have the thought and the belief that, hey, they can get it done. They can still outlast what Alabama is doing. But I will say this. The thing that I'm looking at to say, okay, where is the X factor, or what's going to be the thing that kind of can shift and throw this game? Alabama has done a phenomenal job. And when I say phenomenal job, I mean phenomenal job of knocking down timely three after timely three. I am telling you right now, if you let those guards get in the lane and do their drive and kick routine, oh boy, those Huskies are going to be howling, and not in a good way. Not in a good way. It's going to be a very long day for the Huskies in this one because they do, like you said, they do have guards that are a bit undersized, but they're very explosive. They are very quick off the dribble, and they make good decisions with the ball because we all know that March is about guard play. You don't make it to this far without good guard play, and Alabama's guards have done a phenomenal job of not only knocking down shots when they're open, but finding the open man when there is somebody. So stopping that dribble drive penetration is going to be key because if you can't do that against Alabama, Katie Did's at the doorstep.
No, I don't disagree with that, but I would take it a little further from a specific standpoint, which is you can actually audibly hear Dan Hurley say this when they play a team like Alabama that does like to do dribble drive and kick, stay at home, which means if someone beats you, we're going to try to block their shot with either Klingon or Samson Johnson or someone at the rim versus people helping that kind of innate ability as, I'm sure you played basketball as I have in the past, where you automatically just your body wants to help.
You see a guy getting beaten, you want to rotate. It just wants to happen.
It always happens, and for some reason, I'm telling you, it's only happened twice to UConn in both games on the road where they felt uncomfortable. In the Creighton game, they got in scramble mode, and they allowed a team to shoot 50% from three, a very good shooting team in Creighton. But that's it. Even the Kansas game, Kansas was not a good three-point shooting team this year. They shot almost 48% against UConn earlier in the year. No Steph Castle that game. So I have a hard time believing that Alabama, who is a good three-point shooting team, a shade under 40% as a program, is going to have the float game or the ability to hit mid-range because they don't even take mid-range jump shots. Right. If you're taking away the three-point line and saying funneling everything to the big guy, I have a hard time believing that they can get that done. But you're right. If they do get hot, if UConn does have a game like they did undisciplined against Creighton and it's uncharacteristic, then yeah, it would be a tough matchup. I personally don't see it. But yeah, I agree. If that happens, it would be a tough night for UConn.
I think, and one more thing here. I think that, a lot of people talk about the nerds and getting them out of sports a lot. However, Alabama is one of the best users of analytics in terms of how they get things done because everything is like you said, they don't take mid-range shots. Yep. In terms of three-point attempts per game, number 4 in the nation. Not in the Power 5, not in the SEC. Number 4 in all the nation in attempts, number 5 or 6 in makes per game. So this Alabama team, they've proven stroking from deep is not something. I'm sorry, they're number 2 in makes per game. So they're not a team that shows you like them shooting well is an anomaly, but yet and still it does rely a lot on that. Hey, we get somebody into the lane, and like you said, once I blow by, your body just wants to pull you. It pulls you in the paint to say, oh, this center can't shoot a 3. Oh, this 4 can't knock it down. I'd rather give up a open 3 than a contested 2. Alabama's counting on that. And they're going to say, hey, we don't give a piss about nothing but the Tide. Thank you so very much. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Bama fans, because I'm sure you follow me now, that ain't happening. So don't worry about it. Don't get too excited. So give me some predictions before we get out of here. We got go with your game first. Purdue versus NC State. Your honest prediction. I know you'll give it to me. Yeah. I know you're a state guy. Obviously, I'm a UConn guy. This is a magical run you guys are on. Does it end here, or are we potentially meeting up on Monday?
Fun fact: I didn't have NC State making the Final Four. I had Houston winning the national championship.
Okay.
I thought Houston, and I like to say this a lot, and you can take it from me if you need to. If ifs and buts were berries and nuts, squirrels would never starve. But we live in the real world. This is where we are, right? And if Jamal Shead doesn't get hurt, I very much so believe, oh yeah, Houston's going to go on and win this thing in a tough one over UConn. But with that being said, in terms of what this game is, I love NC State. I love being right a little bit more, okay? And so with that in mind, I'm going to have to go with NC State 88, Purdue 80 in this one because there's something that happens. And I said this about Oregon and Washington the second time they played, rather, last year. I said, oh, Oregon's going to win this game. until I saw how big the line was. I said, oh my God, Washington is getting absolutely no respect. They're going to win this game. That line is bulletin board material. And Oregon may have been the better team. They may have been the better team. The problem is the complete and utter lack of respect to your opponent. That just took them up a level. This NC State team feels like a team of destiny, and moving beyond that, for them to get utterly disrespected in this way for both the men and women, oh, yeah. Yeah, it's up. It's up. I got NC State winning this one in a close one, 88-80 against the two-time player of the year in company.
Yeah, I'm going to be lockstep with you there. Like I said, I don't want it to happen because I almost would rather see UConn play Purdue and take them down. But I think I like NC State 79-76, and I think it's going to be real close. And I just think DJ Burns, he doesn't neutralize Zach Edey, but I think he gives him enough problems because that dude's 300 pounds too. Not gonna be able to move him around the same way you are, the way they do are. And I honestly think you're spot on about their shooting, but I would there are two schools. You can stay at home like we talked about. You can let Zach Edey go for 40 and not let everyone else shoot, get 20 or 25, some of the other stars. I don't know what Kevin Keatts is going to do. I think he may say, we'll play one-on-one with Zach and let him do his thing. But I think somehow, some way, just from destiny, I think State wins by 3. All right, let's pivot real quick. What you got for Bama and UConn?
I always worry about teams who the three-point shot is not just like a part of their game. It's not just like hey, we do this well. It's like, this is a staple. We need this to go well for us to be good. With that in mind, I'm going UConn. UConn's got too many ways to do it. They're proven, they're experienced, and like you said, Hurley's going to be screaming his head off. Every time somebody gets blown by, stay your tail at home, and that will send Bama home. I think the Bama's had a phenomenal run. I think that it should not be slept on what they're doing, and overnight, it seems like Alabama has turned into a basketball school. Who would have thought? Who would have known? Who would have thunk it? But, yeah, as great as the story is, as great as Nate Oates has been this year and all that, hey, I got UConn winning this one.
I agree with you. I think it's going to – anytime I've been using the 3 M's for this, if you can't play better defense than Marist, Maine, and Merrimack, as Alabama hasn't this year, from a Ken Pond perspective, you're not stopping the number 1 offense in the country in UConn. So I'm going UConn 82, Bama 64. I think it's another one of these slow avalanches where UConn builds a lead and doesn't give up. They're going to know what it's like to have someone in your face when you shoot at all times for the first time all year, really. So before we go, guys, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it is also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national news covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now and available on the free Fire TV channels app. Well, for my guest today, Kenton Gibbs, I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, telling you guys, stay locked in, stay connected, make sure your toughness meter is always rising, and as always, go Huskies.